All right, so let's roll into it here. I've already introduced myself, but I'm going to let these characters take a moment or two to introduce themselves.
So good morning, everyone. My name is John Paler. I work for a company called E3 Omni, where I am the founder and principal. I've spent the last 30 plus years working in distribution and manufacturing. I started off at a company based in Chicago called Grainger Industrial Supply, WW Grainger, Ackland's Grainger. Had a chance to work throughout the entirety of the business, doing large-scale business process management, doing design and implementation of ERPs, building out our showrooms, offices, and warehouses across North America and into Central America. Then I got involved in this wonderful world we call digital, which back in 2010 was really just e-commerce, but it's evolved quite a bit over the course of the last 16 years. I got a chance to work for a company called Caterpillar, working with our worldwide dealer network and helping to build out the overarching digital customer engagement strategy for all of the dealers, all of our customers, as well as all the distributed marketers across the globe. And then I went to work for a company called Rexel, where I was the chief digital officer of a $7 billion electrical distributor. I've had the great privilege of working with organizations across distribution and manufacturing the last 3 years with E3 Omni, and I really get excited about the opportunities to help move business along and recognize that it's not just about a technology transformation. In fact, it's more often the cultural transformation that needs to embody that. So thank you very much for your participation in the digital momentum research, and we're really excited to share some of the output of that over the course of today and beyond.
Thanks, John. Kendra.
All right, thank you. And just to say, there are some empty seats up here, so I know some people have come in. John doesn't bite, I swear. He's really nice. We just met in person for the first time today after months of working together. So very excited to have everybody here. My name is Kendra Johnson. I am the founder of the Venned Group, which is a training and development firm based out of Toronto. We do service across North America, and the common thread I'll pull through is that we focus on the human dynamics. We find and fix some of those barriers that are caused by all of us sitting in the room, right? We're all guilty of them, but we're also all the solution to helping whether that's adoption or helping our teams work better together. So I've spent the past 8 years researching and digging into both qualitative and quantitative studies into what makes organizations function, starting with middle managers, who are, I always say, the squeeze of every organization or in every organization, all the way up to senior leaders. And so really excited to share some of that information with all of you, and to collect some information from you as well, a healthy little pulse check to see where we're sitting today. So thanks again for being here. Thanks for filling up the front seats, and we're gonna have a lot of fun today.
Thanks, Kendra. Rob?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Manne. I'm the founder of Inflective, a small but mighty revenue operations and CRM solutions company in Toronto. And I was lucky enough to be a guest last year at the very first Digital Momentum Summit. And then I was asked to participate as a presenting sponsor. And I think what really captivated me about this event is just how we're having the real conversations. A lot of people need to get to from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 2, and I like the fact that we're part of the team to help that. So yeah, essentially we, in terms of the work that we do, typically work with small to medium-sized companies that need to level up their sales, marketing, and customer success operations, and we are obsessed with the customer journey. So you're going to hear from me today as well as this afternoon on some things in that field.
Awesome, thanks, Rob. So these folks were gracious enough to accept my invitation they thought they were just participating in the event, but we have been working on some research for the past 6 months or so. I'm not sure if they all knew what they were biting off when they accepted my invitation to get involved with that. As Kendra alluded to, this is the first time that we've actually all been together in person ever. We've been meeting individually, one-on-one, and whatnot, but the first time, but we've been meeting virtually for months now to sort of work on what we're going to talk about. So thank you all for everything that you've done. It's been a lot of fun. It's been the most fun that I've had doing some really hard work in a long time. So we're going to talk about how to advance a slide. We are going to talk about creating digital momentum for the next little while. To kind of, again, sort of set the stage here, You might remember this stat if you were here last year. 81% of buyers choose the front runner that they identified in the selection phase. So if you're in a purchasing situation, great stat. It really helps sort of think about what it means to move a decision forward, or maybe the fact that what you're actually trying to do is tease out the folks that have already made the decision and make sure that you reinforce their understanding because they've already made up their mind. That was a key takeaway from last year's summit. So there are things that we need to do. One, to make sure that we enter into that 80% to begin with before we even get to talk to them. And then two, what we're doing when we're talking to somebody at that stage of the sales process is supporting their understanding. We're not there to convince them or change their understanding. We're there to make sure that they understand that they found their way to the right place. What was so great, like, whoa, that's a great stat. Like, all came away feeling like there's something I can really chew on there. This is not the only time that I get up on stage and do talks and present. And so over the course of the rest of last year, had an opportunity to present at a few other events. And there was one event that I was at, and there were 3 other speakers that used the exact same stat. And I went, holy moly. That's not what I did. Everybody had been working very hard and diligently and was very passionate about what they were trying to communicate. And they had turned ChatGPT into deep research mode. And they had found this stat and they felt fantastic about it. I felt fantastic about it, and so did everybody else. And then we all said it to each other in an echo chamber. And we're like, what have we done? So it does not reduce the impact of what this is saying, but I came away going, how do we set ourselves apart? How do we provide any unique value? So obviously, the answer is to do your own unique research that nobody else has access to. Bit self-serving, but we would love to share it with you because we asked some questions that we felt were very meaningful. We are in a period of rapid technological acceleration, and obviously that includes pressure from AI. And we know that there are people in the room that have got a handle on this and are doing it better than others. And we know that there are people in the room who are terrified and don't know where to start. And if you are on any ends of those spectrum, you are not alone. And we want to make sure that we're understanding what is it that differentiates some businesses who are moving forward with conviction and confidence, and what might be adding friction for others that haven't quite gotten to the same level of transformation and AI adoption. So the Digital Momentum Project was born, along with the support from my friends here. We worked on boiling this down to 18 questions. Many of you have gone through and filled out this survey, so you're familiar. We are actually probably up to about 60 responses at this point. And what we really loved about the audience that we captured here was that 89% of the people that participated in this survey were in a leadership role. So they're in charge of delivering the digital experience, or they're in charge of managing certain aspects of the business. So we're getting some really good, meaty data here to help us understand collectively what might be happening in the ecosystem. So we wanted to kind of bring it back to a central theme. What are we trying to do as we think about this information that we're going to present? There are a lot of us who know how to do business digitally. We have the tactics. We know the checklist of what it means. We have a website, we have a social media, we have a content calendar. We can do things digitally. But we want you to shift thinking into what, it's a nuance here, but I know you can get it. What's the difference between that and then being a digital business? So think about the contrast of those two questions as we go through this data, the rest of the presentations, and then after lunch, John's going to make you really think about it and answer some questions live as we get into it. So let's get into some of what we discovered. We really, what was interesting here was we wanted to know where businesses were focusing their strategic attention. And we didn't just ask about these questions, and these numbers add up to more than 100% because you can have multiple focuses. Despite all the pressure about AI and digital and transforming, 64% of the folks that responded said that they were focused on top-line revenue growth. So that's a classic business position. We're all looking at how do we grow revenue? How do we attract more customers? How do we work on our pipeline? And then about 44% were focused on that sort of cost saving, efficiency, operating more efficiently, more effectively. And AI was in there as a choice, and it fell below the other two, but it's still pretty significant. 41% of respondents are saying, no, AI is a strategic focus for us. So we were encouraged to see that revenue growth and cost saving and efficiency, those classic business strategic focuses, are still the predominant, that's still the predominant mind share. But we are very well aware that AI is occupying quite a bit of that mental bandwidth. And this was the really captivating stat, and it's the one that we wanted to put at the beginning of this presentation to sort of get you thinking about which situation you're in. We asked where the money is going. It's one thing to ask you to say, where do you think the strategic focus is going? It's another to say, if you're spending money, then that's a good, clear signal of where your strategic focus is. 84% said that they are investing in the tools, and 14% said that they're investing in their workforce. So there's kind of two sides of that coin. One is tool investment is outpacing capacity building. So we're giving people the tools. KPMG is saying we're throwing AI licenses at problems, and we are under-investing in people's capacity to use those tools. We're just giving them the software, the licenses, and hoping that something good pops out the other side. Flip that over, and there's another way of looking at this. We've already got awesome, great, capable people, and now we've finally got the tools that are going to unlock productivity for them. We don't need to invest in the workforce because we've got an awesome team. They're very capable already, and we've got this new fabulous technology that's going to let us be more capable and more impactful. So I'll be curious to sort of hear what you guys think about sort of which side of that coin you're better aligned with. I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer here, but it's definitely something to think about when you're adopting some of the solutions and the technologies that we talk about here today. So again, as we're going through the conversations here, we want you to think about how you can translate that into moving forward with purpose for yourselves. The offset in this slide is because I had it nicely centered and powerful at the beginning, and I thought, well, everybody's here because I want to move forward with purpose. Like, let's give the audience a little bit of credit. So we just want you to move forward with even more purpose, okay? We want you to find the thing that's going to unlock that next step for you. So that's kind of laying the groundwork. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues here to talk through a little bit more of the data in more depth. We're going to learn about the difference between the pressure that everybody's feeling and the readiness that they feel that they have to innovate or operate. We're going to look at the market pressure that everybody's experiencing and some of those B2B realities. We're going to dive in a little bit more on AI and the attention that it's getting. And then we're going to also look at some of the friction in more detail about what is causing some of that hesitation, and then take a look at how some people are helping make sure that they're winning with this in this current digital ecosystem. Rob, I think you're up here to take us through the first few data points.
Yeah, and when we were looking at the results, we had the opportunity to choose the thing that was most relevant to us or the thing that excited us the most. And I was really struck by this question around how is digital momentum translating into results? So this is time for the audience participation side part of the day. I would love to have people put their hands up if you're feeling external pressures at work. Put your hands up. Great. And would you say that some of those pressures have increased in the past 12 to 18 months?
More pressure now? Yeah.
More pressure? Yeah. So as you can see from the results, 4 out of 5 people said, the average rating was 4 out of 5 felt that much pressure at work. And so, there's a lot of things that are causing that pressure if you think about it, right? There's those external pressures, so climate, the economy, politics. That's sort of the macro pressures that's happening. But then when you look internally at what organizations are facing, right, budgets have remained flat or are shrinking. People are being asked to do more with less. And ultimately, there's been waves of layoffs that have happened, particularly in the tech sector where a lot of our clients work. And so, that pressure is really understandable. And, so thinking about some of the things related to AI, it's been around for a little while. And I think there's an increasing pressure the longer, like it's been 3 years now. If people haven't started to do that, the pressure's kind of ratcheting up. Then we also asked the question about readiness. And so the average rating given was people felt 3 out of 5. They were like just more than half ready to deal with some of the technological changes that are happening. And so, some of those things relate to, maybe organizations might be putting a bit of a rosy picture on things. So in our experience, we talk to people about, tell us about your digital adoption, and oh yeah, things are great. We're doing all the things, and then you might talk to the sales team, and they'll say, well, the CRM is a bit of a disaster. There's nothing in there, or marketers are saying that they don't have the data that they need to segment. And one CEO recently told us, I feel like I'm flying blind. I don't have the data to make the right decisions. So I think that's another level of readiness that people are starting to struggle with. And of course that affects confidence. So the lowest indicator that we got was 2.8 out of 5 felt that they were confident to meet the challenges ahead. And so, all those things mean that, there's that pressure that's causing the low amount of readiness and really struggles with confidence that a lot of organizations are facing today. So on the next slide, this was a really interesting stat. We basically looked at the level of activity. And so we asked, what are you exactly doing with digital transformation now? And the plus side of this, that 80%, so the vast majority, if you add those two up, 80% are doing stuff, right? They're active. So, and almost a little over 1/3 are accelerating. So that means they've been doing things for a while and they're actually picking up speed. So maybe they're investing more, they're trying new things. So that's really promising. And one of the companies that we're going to speak with today, I would put in the accelerating category, in that, they've invested in a CRM solution, they've invested in AI, and they're looking at bottlenecks in their process regularly to try to determine how can we streamline things, how can we improve the customer experience. But the biggest group was the optimizing side. So 45% of people said that they're currently optimizing. So still, that's pretty good, right? That means they're active, and it means that they're sort of iterating. Maybe they made some changes, not necessarily picking up speed, but they're doing things that are, can really work for tech, right? Testing and learning, trying little pilots. So that's great, but in their competitive set, one thing you need to worry about is, are your competitors doing the acceleration? Are they advancing at a faster stage than you are, which could really cause challenges with being able to keep up? And the last thing is, considering how disruptive AI is as a technology, you may not be able to get the full benefit of it if you're doing it in sort of a piecemeal or a very small fashion. So those are some of the things that really struck out to me. So as I said, we're going to be speaking a little bit more about these themes this afternoon, and Kendra is going to be talking about AI and acceleration.
And thanks, Rob. Just before we move on to Kendra, one of the things that I found interesting about this stat is, again, so if you flip it over, what's not on the slide here is the 20% of people that are like below optimizing. They're still struggling. They're still stuck. They really are disoriented. And so there's kind of, if you add that to the optimizing, you've got 65% of people who are like, yeah, I'm just holding on. And you've only got 35% who are like, yeah, I got this. I'm leading ahead on this. So there's many different ways to look at this data, and hopefully just kind of get everybody thinking about the place that they're in. All right, Kendra.
All right, thanks, Scott. So as Rob mentioned, confidence in adopting AI and technology is very low. And so what I want to go over in the next couple of minutes is where that confidence is leaking out of organizations and out of teams. But before I do that, I want to share a bit of context, which is something that we're going to be talking about a lot today. When I was explaining that I was one of the presenting partners for this event to a client who had, we'd worked together for about 3 years, and CEO of a great company, and he said, Kendra, I'm a little confused. You are the best person I know at being human. What are you doing at a digital transformation conference? And I said, yeah, no, very valid question. So for anybody that is also confused, let me just elaborate. And I said, do you remember years ago when you were rolling out that new tool, you had already made up your mind, and then you announced it at the town hall very enthusiastically that this is what we're doing? And I said, and respectfully, your team basically gave you the middle finger. Do you remember that time? And he said, yeah, I do, kind of. And I said, And he just looked at me and went, oh, I understand why you're there now. Because had we brought our people into the fold sooner, I might not have blocked that memory out of my mind, and we would have had a stronger, smoother, more proactive adoption. So that's why Scott made the connection and invited me to be up here with all of you today. And one of the things that was really interesting about the research that we found was how people looked at their engagement with AI to date. So you can see here that 53% of you are experimenting with some tool, some technology, and 27% of you are already deploying it. And what I found to be really interesting about this particular data is that for the 27% of you deploying it, that means that your team is still in the experimentation phase, right? So this is almost like cyclical data if you think about it, that you're deploying something, and for the vast majority, we will hear from Derek later today from Welke, who is not doing this in this way. They're rolling it out in a very, very meaningful way. But for the majority of integrations and rollouts, we deploy, and then our teams are still in that experimentation phase. And we can forget that it can be confusing. They're still learning the ropes. They're still figuring that out. And that comes with a number of feelings, a number of frictions, and a number of leaks, which is, again, as I mentioned, where that confidence kind of seeps out of our initiatives. So I'll just get a show of hands again, please and thank you. You're going to get an arm workout today, I think. How many of us, if you were to roll something out or have already rolled something out, would wait until you were about 90% confident before you introduced a new tool or process to your team? So 90% confidence. Okay, what about 80% confidence? All right, 50%?
Oh.
Oh, okay, very nice. 10% confident. Okay, great. So obviously, this is nuanced. What were you going to say, Scott?
No, I was just going to say, we've got a lot of experimenters in the room.
Yes, yeah,
great.
Exactly. Which is awesome. And what we found is for some of us who are 90, wait until we're 90%, that's where you see the story I told you about our CEO client. The team says, you've known about this for how long? And we have context and information that we could have shared with you that would have been helpful in the deployment, in the adoption of this. So I just wanted to get a survey. It looks like we're sitting in a pretty good space, that the majority of us bring our teams into the fold sooner rather than waiting until everything is perfect. And if you're like me, that's really, really damn hard, waiting until everything is not perfect to introduce people in, but that's how we get the feedback. So with that being said, my second favorite piece of data from our research, and it's no surprise as to why, was that we opened the floor up to all of you to give us some qualitative data. And we said, if your 2026 initiatives were to fail for some reason or to be successful, what would that one thing be? And we let you say anything. I think someone referenced the moon. I don't know whether that's like an astrology thing or just they like to, who knows, but there were a lot of answers. And overwhelmingly, the majority of you referenced team dynamics would be the thing that either contributes to the success of your 2026 initiatives or derails them. And that outpaced any kind of operational gaps or market conditions. 51% is huge. I will get out ahead of this to say the answer is not to get rid of everyone and to move to robots. So
Can we
I
get
just
rid of
want,
some people?
Maybe. Is your team in the room? Everybody's safe, don't worry. But I just wanted to put that caveat out there. There are ways that we can proactively build that confidence, so move it from a 2.8 to closer to a 4 or 5. I don't think we'll ever be fully confident. And that's where the experimentation comes into play, right? Letting your team get comfortable with the tools, understand what you're doing, understand new processes. And that's something I'll walk you through later today in a case study with one of the companies that we helped roll out a tool with and a full process revamp. Again, that is not what I do. We don't work with tools. We don't necessarily, technology is not our focus, but there's always an underlying human element that prevents people from being able to do that effectively because of any of that friction that we see with the human dynamics. So it's been a lot of fun looking at this information. And again, some of us might resonate with the 51%. Anybody resonate with 51% of this? Yes? Yeah, okay, perfect. I saw some nods, whether you want to admit it or not. Let's see how the rest of the day plays out, and you can let me know this afternoon.
Thanks, Kendra.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, so one of the things that I get really excited about is when we do a survey like this, it gives us a lot of the ability to formulate hypotheses and then actually challenge the data. And so I took these 3 simple questions, right? The questions around, who's got clarity of metrics, what they're going to look to accomplish over the course of the next 18 to 24 months. Where do we have alignment between what management is saying and what teams are actually executing? And then what is that overall level of confidence in their ability to deliver against what's been committed to, right? 3 rather simple questions, but I think based on the feedback that you provided, there's some insight in here that is kind of hard to ignore. And it's that the answers are simple, but the integration amongst these, as well as the independence of these, is not very simple at all. So when we start thinking through this, right, clear metrics, right, we've got only a third of organizations that took our survey actually indicated they have clear metrics for the work that they are doing. And as I think through that, I think about the organizations that are accelerating, as Scott and Rob were talking about earlier, or I think about those that weren't on the slide, which is those that are drifting. What's really interesting is that the organizations that are accelerating and organizations that are drifting, they have the same level of metrics identification for their work, which means that there are people that are working incredibly fast without metrics to understand whether they are effective. There's also people in organizations that are drifting. They don't have a clear understanding of where they're going. They don't have a high level of confidence. They don't have metrics either. Now, what's interesting about that is those organizations, those people are working hard. Those people are putting forth effort. They actually have a purpose in their work every day. But yet, they don't have metrics with regard to their work either. That's a major concern for organizations because I don't believe they're going to be generating the momentum. I think they're actually going to be developing more chaos in their organizations. Then when I think about the strategic reality, it's how aligned is the organization in terms of the execution of the work at the management level with the execution of the work at the individual contributor and at the team level. Only 44%, so less than half of organizations, believe that they have clear alignment between what they are doing and the outcomes that it's supposed to drive on behalf of the organization. And so as you start getting into the numbers with regards to the strategic realities, you've got a significant number of organizations where the work that is actually being done at the team level doesn't appear in the purpose, in the mission, in the vision, or even in the annual report or the roadmap for the organization. So how do those people generate confidence in their work when they don't see it in the numbers that are reported out, in the results that are produced, or in the satisfaction that their employees and their customers and their suppliers realize? So I think that's another significant concern. And then the confidence factor. How confident are you in your ability to achieve the outcomes that you have been committed to? Only 41% of employees that took our survey, right, at a leadership level are confident in their ability to achieve what they've been committed to, which means over half are not. And in fact, as we started getting into the details of the data, we find that there's really a strong correlation between confidence and one provocative element. You're confident when you've got metrics assigned to your work, as well as when you have alignment between the work that is being done at the individual contributor or the team level and the work that is actually being done at the executive level. So there is a clear connection there. But unfortunately, as you see in the last number, only 10% of all survey participants had a high level of confidence, a 4 or 5, in all 3 of these categories. So you think about that, that's really the intersection of where momentum is generated, right? When we think about organizations that are accelerating, organizations that are optimizing, or organizations that are stuck in drift, the ability to tie confidence and the outcomes along with the metrics that the organization measures is what is going to allow people to generate significant amounts of engaged employees and engaged customers and successful outcomes on behalf of that. So I find that this one's really interesting, and we're going to explore this a little bit later this afternoon as we start thinking about moving from activity to momentum and making sure that we are developed. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard this phrase, vision without action is merely a dream. Well, I would add on to that and say action without outcome is busyness. And many organizations are demonstrating to us they are taking action, they're not delivering the outcomes that go along with the organization's outputs, and therefore all they are is busy. And we're going to talk more about how we move from busy to momentum to results and outcomes and ultimate value creation today.
How about that? Thank you, John. It's interesting, in the same article on the logic that I referenced earlier, there was another quote that I'm going to get it wrong, but it basically said, you know, if you give somebody the ability to be more productive, you're not necessarily increasing your output, you're just increasing the amount of work that's being done. So thinking quite deliberately about how we can connect these dots and make things more clear for our teams, our customers, and our projects, I think is going to be a useful thought exercise for everybody. This is just a warning that Andrea and maybe Tim, I'm going to call on you in a second. So I'm curious to sort of get some feedback from the room here in a moment. What sort of stuck out? What other questions do you have? How do you feel about that question, that consideration that we've posed to you to keep in mind for the day about doing business digitally, or whether you're wholesomely embracing what it means to be a digital business? Even if you are not a business that exists online, you're not an online business, but all of us are using these tools, and it is an ingrained part of how we operate right now, regardless of the type of business that you are, whether you're selling, hard goods or whatnot. There is a way to be a digital business at the same time. So we talked about where that strategic attention is converging. We talked about pressure and readiness. We talked about how active the market is. And we looked at how AI is mainstream in our attention, but not in our business maturity. We looked at internal dynamics. There's probably some international dynamics that are causing some problems too. Internal dynamics that are a hidden constraint, and that the winning story is not move faster, it's to work on a little bit more of that strategic alignment. So here's the slide with all of the data points that we've just talked about. The floor is yours. Are there any questions or reflections? And Andrea, this is where I'm going to hand you a microphone. Can I steal yours, John? Okay. Who else? Tim, are you around? We got one question right up here, Andrea.
Hi, great presentation. Thank you so much. I love the research. I'm really interested in the team dynamics question. So Kendra, maybe this is to you. Digging into that a bit more, is it really alluding to that people are not enabled, like we talked about the enablement before and the lack of investment, or is it lack of alignment between the direction on the AI and strategy, or is it something else? I guess there's a lot to that team dynamics, I think. I'd love a bit more insight.
Yeah, definitely. Great question. I'm going to take the easy route right now and say a little bit of all of the above. And as we go into this afternoon, I know John's going to touch on it. I'm also going to touch on some of the contributing factors, but certainly misalignment, that there isn't clarity of, that people are going in different directions, and 1 degree off bring somebody to Australia if we're looking at a plane ride away, right? So that misalignment is showing up in those small micro moments, which I think is causing a lot of these team dynamics. We also see, as John mentioned, metrics. So people don't really know what they're working towards. There's no direction or clear direction. And I want to say on the other side too of that stat, it was what would make them successful or what could derail them. So there's a lot of good that is packed into that 51% as well, or could be, that we'll also explore today. But it's the variables are endless, and that's one of the qualitative questions we could have asked there. But we'll definitely get into some of those contributing factors today.
Can I add one small point? We were talking too that siloing is a huge problem, and I made the point that I feel that smaller organizations used to be immune to siloing, but now we're seeing it with companies like with 10, 15 people, and it's really like, why wasn't I engaged? How do I influence this? And that bringing people into the conversation earlier, you'd think if people are in a smaller team, it would be easier to do, but it's just not.
Yeah, I don't think it matters on the team size, really. Good question. Another one? Yeah. We'll get to here.
So one of the elements that was brought up before is around talking about accessibility to data, the CEO story about when they don't have the data to make decisions. And I use that as a launching point because I think that data gets used as a buzzword a lot instead of information. It's just a lot of stats, numbers, but no one necessarily drawing out tangible, actionable information to base strategies and decisions on. And when I look at these stats here, what this brings me to mind of is that it ties into the team dynamics element in particular. What I think a lot of people, whether they would call it experimenting or not with AI, they're producing that same base level thing, whether it's data, so they're just drawing a lot of numbers and using AI to spit it out, or using AI to produce a lot of AI slop in terms of posters or whatnot, just to very quickly meet a need, just because they're trying to get it off their plate and move along. So how do we address both the experiment number and the team dynamic situation? Because while we have the very high tool investment, people are still using those tools to just kind of produce that very first level baseline thing. How do we get people to be more willing to use these tools and to use these opportunities to be more experimentative and produce information, produce higher level output instead of just more of the same lesser quality output?
So you've got a number of great points and observations, and I would tend to agree with most, if not all of them. One of the very first things that I like to talk about is, statistics lie, right? The reality is we just did a whole thing on I understand, but data is valuable. Data is a coordinate that you can look at and be able to understand where you're at this point in time, right? But to treat it as gospel, I think is inappropriate, and I would actually say it's malpractice. And so what I think is very important in businesses is to look for the data point and then go to validate that. Validate that hopefully with other employees, with other customers. I've got a saying that says, if you don't know where to go, take a partner. You're always going to get to a better spot, even if you get to the same destination, because you had a chance to validate that with someone else. And so I like to look at data as directional, and then how do we marry that up with other things that we know? And we talk about how much fun this project is. Well, this project's been a blast, and I've used it to inform other activities that we've done at other events where you're like, hey, we got this nugget here. Let me go validate that. Next thing you know, I'm coming back, and I'm like, I had a table talk with 12 people at this event with hosted 250 people, and these are the things that they're really talking about. Next thing we know, all 4 of us are like, what about this and what about that? So I think it's a great opportunity for us to do that. And then without giving away everything that we're going to talk about this afternoon, one of the things I will tell you is that when we invest in tools or technology without thinking about the people, I tend to disagree with Scott's optimistic point of view that, hey, it's because we've got great employees. We have great employees, but we need to also invest in the business's operating model and how you leverage the tools and the capabilities in order to inform the outcomes. And so I've got a couple of slides this afternoon where we're going to talk specifically about why investing in people and the processes and the work that occurs between people and the handoff is of critical importance. So I'd like to continue that conversation this afternoon, but happy to talk about it as well more.
And I think that it's possible to be investing in the tools and over-indexing in that, just to be a bit more optimistic, and to be intentional. The last guy who stole my mic was to be intentional about the fact that you are experimenting. To say right now our strategy is to explore and to experiment and to try and to expect to fail. And a lot of the times that replicates how we're deploying AI, even in production. What's cool about this moment that we're all in is that we're all in it together. And I think people are learning very quickly when and how to trust AI. And when they see an AI chatbot, they're willing to engage with it with a certain amount of their own personal filter and check against it. So I think we're all understanding that it's less, we're not expecting it to be perfect. We've all quickly learned that that's the case, but we know it's pretty close to accurate. And so telling the business, hey, we're gonna do this now, and it's gonna be okay, everybody, but we're gonna get through this together, can be a very deliberate strategy.
One thing, I heard some ambiguous language, like more data, and you said the perfect keyword, which is being specific. And I think specificity is one of the things that is very underutilized when we're sharing information with our team. So if we need more data, what does more look like? Because someone can think quantity, but we're actually looking for quality of data in this particular area. So I'm a big fan of keeping things simple. So wherever you can be as specific as possible, it helps your team understand the direction where they should go. Otherwise, you will get whatever people know how to do, right? They're trying to meet your expectations in the best way they know how.
Awesome. Aaron, I think we have another question in front here.
Thank you. Great start, by the way. So based on the start, I'm not going to sneak out at break or anything like that. I'm here for the day. This is awesome. I guess maybe questions or observations, but a topic that keeps coming up over the last few weeks, I'm interested to see how we weave that in today, is the difference between AI and automation. I talk to so many organizations that think they have to go to the shiny point of AI, and the calmer heads in the room are saying, hold on, that might be a workflow problem, that might be an automation problem. So I'd be interested if we can weave that in a little bit today. I'm sure it is, but I think we have to help each other not jump too far when if it's about efficiency. It might not be AI, it may just be workflow or automation. The second thing I'm interested to weave in is, maybe Kendra, you'll have a comment, is the IQ, EQ balance. So I come from a sales perspective. I help sales organizations better engage their clients. So I think about that. But I think about AI and technology as ability to increase IQ, the more data, better insights. But that doesn't address our people. That's not going to increase the EQ of the organization. So interested today as we talk about how do we allow our people to continue to raise their game, because at the end of the day, our customers want to engage with human beings, and that's where the EQ comes in. So be interesting to see how we can factor that in as well.
Do you want to hit on IQ and EQ first, or do you want me to go with the AI?
See, we're best friends already. It's great. You too, Rob. I would say that, and you, Scott, AI and technology amplifies IQ, but I would say it also amplifies EQ for the better or for the worse. So we're seeing with technology, if EQ is low, you will know that very quickly and you will see it have a vast ripple effect. If it's high, you don't really notice because things are smooth. So I would say that you really get a benchmark for where it is if there are more kind of roadblocks. And if things are going well, you might not know about it, but it doesn't mean that it's not high. So I love that point, and I think we'll definitely touch on that today. Thank you.
One of my favorite readings from last week was a notion that AI amplifies all the transformations that have not been completed in your organization. And so I think about how it can really disrupt an organization because it exposes all the good and the bad in an organization. My favorite conversation on AI, which was literally an all-day conference last week, was, anybody have any idea how long AI has been around? I know some of you do. Decades. You know, 1950s is when AI was first created. Now, AI, as we know it today, is generative AI, right? Everything that we're talking about. That is very new. But we think about machine learning, we think about data science, right? Recommendation engines, right? Personalization engines. Those were elements of AI that we were putting in place in 2007, in 2010, and 2015. The generative AI piece is new. And one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we spend time talking to employees and training and developing them is helping them see how much difference context matters, right? All four of us take the exact same well-engineered prompt, put it into our engine of choice, and we get very, very different answers. There's some alignment, but we get very different answers because our context is so incredibly different. And so I believe there's a significant opportunity for us to talk through how we leverage that work, as well as to talk about when do we want to automate, right? I'm a big fan of automating workflows, especially the workflows that exist amongst multiple people and exist between people. If we can actually enhance the handoffs between the people that are generating, true value that create the moat in your businesses, we have a great opportunity to actually create not just efficiency, but also revenue opportunities and really drive significant margin enhancement and market share growth for your organizations.
Any other questions? We got one right up here, Aaron.
The question that you asked about when do you deploy like 80%, 90%, 50%, what I'm interested in knowing is, would you then engage the entire company, which like I personally wouldn't do? You find key people that can help you. So do you have a process by which you would start to identify key stakeholders for these implementations?
Definitely, I think we can all speak to that, actually. Yes, 100%. You would find your champions, and I think it also, if you look at layers, it depends on the size of the organization. I would also say it depends on the security that exists within the organization. If you announce change or a new process and you don't already have that foundational security, you will do a lot of backpedaling and you'll have to do a lot of work to get people to the place where they feel foundationally secure in order to adopt whatever it is that you're announcing. From some personal research that we've done, we found that I'd say about 60 to 70% of senior leaders were very comfortable with change and thrived on that, and it got less and less and less as they got further away from the change. But what was surprising was once we hit the IC level, that actually spiked, and we found that there were a number of people within the ICs, yes, individual contributors, thank you, yep, that we found were actually very comfortable with change but had been underutilized in these organizations because people just thought, oh, they're going to feel some way about the change. So if you can identify who those people are that, first of all, understand the strategy, can carry through, have the know-how and the competence as well, and get them aligned, that's an easier lift for you. But I wouldn't say announce it to an entire organization until you feel like you have those people in place, you do have a decision made, and then at that point, and we'll talk about this actually later this afternoon, but at that point there are different ways you can announce it, that the decision's been made and now we want input, or we're looking at this as an exploratory conversation. So when you name the outcome and what you're looking for for from people, it helps them come along the journey. So the long answer is no, I wouldn't announce it to an entire organization until you have some key pillars, which I'll touch on this afternoon.
I'd love to add one little point. You remember when you did the like show your hands with the sort of when you would announce something? I took that to mean launch, right? And I'm like, oh, don't want to tell anyone that we're launching until it's really ready. That confidence. But really, what I think you're asking about is when you start to talk about it and start to engage and socialize the change that's happening. And so that needs to happen much sooner than people think. And a lot of the part, like we do a lot of rollouts of CRM systems and new processes, and a lot of the time it's like in that discovery, you don't want to just launch something to people without having engaged them in the process of like, tell me your pain points, tell me what drives you crazy, tell me what your wish list is of things to brighten your day and speed up your workflows. They're going to be that much more 2 months later or whenever the tool's ready, they're going to be that much more invested in actually making it work than if they're not engaged in that. And so, I recommend almost like, even if you don't necessarily need all of those people, because if you've heard from 10 people and then 20 people that are going to contribute, they're going to say the same thing, you still might want to talk to those 20 people to just get them in the tent and get them aligned.
I mean, I like what you said earlier too about the fact that there's different people in the organization have a different comfort level with change. And being one of those people who probably moves a little bit too fast sometimes, it really stresses out other people in the organization. It kind of compounds the issue. So I'm a bit of a disruptor in that sense, not a healthy one. But I think being aware of those different kinds of personalities is probably part of the solution. Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? Okay, so we'll take a short break. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to wander back into the networking